Hi everyone, and welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week, normally, we meet a different person from a different career within information security. This week, though, our guest could not make it. Yep, that sucks. Sometimes things come up very last minute. Hi, Ben from Scotland. Sometimes things come up last minute and there's nothing we can do. And so I hope Farah is well. I'm sure she is. But yeah, last minute scheduling, kablam. So instead, I was thinking that I would briefly tell you about API security best practices. So hi. I'm just saying hi to everyone in the chat because I can. So basically, I consult and I teach, and we have a secure coding course that I've been teaching live, but we haven't finished recording yet, so that the We Hack Purple podcast or the We Hack Purple Academy can actually have it on demand for everyone. And one of the things we teach is API security best practices. And unfortunately, for some reason, a lot of devs, when they start writing APIs, they just forget. They forget about security. They think there's no front end, and therefore no one's going to find it. Yes, we are. And they don't follow all the best practices, plus the extra things that are specifically helpful for APIs. So I'm going to go over a few. So first, let me explain what APIs are. So it stands for Application Programming Interface. But an API can be just how a computer talks to another computer. It does a service for someone usually. So there are internet, like web APIs, where there's like a service and you can call it and it'll do things like look up a postal code for you. Let's say you give it the address, it looks up a postal code. You give it a postal code, it looks up the address. Awesome. So your web app is just calling this little service, and it goes and it does something for you, and it sends you back some data, or it does the task that you asked it to. Yes, awesome. In your operating system, there are APIs. All sorts of things have APIs, and it's just little services that go off and do magic. Honestly, it's really nice to have services that just go and do all these things. We don't even think about them most of the time. The reason why APIs have become sort of front and center recently in security, or application security specifically, is that, developers have started putting them on the internet. They've started making applications where there's a microservices architecture. So microservices architecture is where basically there's a big GUI front end beautifulness that your users see, but behind it there's all these different little services, APIs, if you will, and they go off and do whatever the things that the app needs done. And so if one of them goes down, the rest of your app is still up. If you need to change something in one, you don't have to risk recompiling and redeploying the entire app. You just deploy this one little tiny thing. And if it does one little tiny service, the risk is so much lower. It's complex to manage a microservice architecture, but it's worth it in many different ways. And so the reason why APIs have become so exciting is because developers have not been protecting them. And by developers, I mean a very significant percentage. So I don't want to say exactly this percentage are not writing security into their APIs, but it's enough such that it's the first thing pen testers look for. And they'll do things like talk to your API when they shouldn't be allowed to. Only your app or the service account for your app should be able to talk to that API. A lot of APIs aren't doing authentication and authorization and making sure they know who they're talking to and that they should be talking to that person. Another thing a lot of APIs are not doing is, making sure that they're not being called over and over and over and over and over again. Abuse of APIs, and by that I mean specifically, calling it way too many times, trying to brute force your way in, etc., again, is a thing that a lot of devs aren't accounting for, and it's happening a lot successfully. And so the first thing an attacker wants to do is figure out how to talk to your API, and lots of devs just have the Swagger file, the open API definition file, just open on the net. That's great as an attacker. Thank you. Now I know exactly how to ask for what I want. So there's some comments in the chat that I'm just going to get to. So there's very little guidance for security in APIs. It's not discussed as much as it should be, which is why your training's so awesome. Oh, thanks, Ben. There's often a lack of boundary checking in APIs. Yep, I agree with all of the things you said. So first of all, I'm going to put a link to an API best practices download from WeHackPurple so that you can just... You have to sign up for our newsletter. I know it's the worst, but our newsletter is free, and then you can just unsubscribe if you don't want to, or you can keep subscribing because I think it's awesome. I don't even write it. Someone else writes it. Oh, there we go. And so if you wanted to get the download, you go to newsletter.wehackpurple.com/API-security. And then you can just download it there, or just tweet at us at WeHackPurple, and we'll just share it with you. But basically, I'm going to talk about those things today. There's another comment in the chat. Hi, I've deployed and broken my app before. I wish I had a microservices architecture at that point. Oh my gosh. Yes, Kellen. Yes. There's a lot of yes. One more thing I want to mention about APIs before we go into the best practices is there's like a lot of complications around testing APIs. And I had a link already, and then of course then I lost it, but okay, here it is. So there's this hashtag I created called AskInfoSec. So hashtag AskInfoSec on Twitter, and I ask questions. And I retweet other people using it so that we can all find answers to things we want. And so I asked, can anyone recommend an automated API security testing tool to me? I want DAST, Dynamic AppSec Testing, for APIs. And there was a lot of responses. So a lot of people told me, you can use Postman. Yeah, I know. If I want to manually test something, Postman rules. It's awesome. It's a great tool. But it's not automated. I want point and click for my clients. When I'm not there, and quite frankly, I don't do pen testing anymore. I do like application security consulting and teaching. And I don't sit there and hack away at APIs. I have a different job now. So I want a tool for them that's automated. So a lot of people suggested, if you get your Swagger definition file or your WSDL file, if you're doing older types of APIs, you can feed it into a tool like Burp Suite, and then it will know how to talk to it. But again, you're still stuck doing some manual testing. Most of these tools that I have seen up until this point, what they do is they do a passive scan of the API, and they will verify the cookies, the settings on your cookies. They'll verify if you have security headers. They'll tell you if your encryption looks okay. They'll say, you're passing a parameter in the clear. That seems like a no-no. But that's it. That's the whole thing. And so there's newer companies out there that are adding to this. So some of the suggestions were Neuralegen. Some of the suggestions were Wrestler from Microsoft. Some of the suggestions were Crunch42. Oh, thank you, Ben. Ben sent an interesting one to my Twitter. I appreciate that. Stackhawk, which is sort of like a beautiful GUI overlay managey thing for Zap, like Zed Attack Proxy from OWASP. And they said they have many improvements specifically based around APIs, shameless self-promo. And I was like, yeah, that's what this thread's for, do it. So some people were saying that API's App Spider could do it. And I was like, really? Just because I haven't seen that do that. Fortify's Web Inspect was suggested, by Fortify. So mostly the vendors were suggesting themselves, and that is fine. A bunch of people suggested very silly things like tinfoil or holding your breath. Hijack existing smoke with integration tests. I don't know what hijack existing smoke means, but I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. There is an OWASP tool, which I had not heard of yet, called API Check. I'm just going to put a link of that in the chat in case people want to check it out. And I'm going to just put it on the screen here. Oh, wait, no, that's the Twitter. Ignore that. Just so I can hide that. I'm going to, because when you get something from Twitter, then it wants to put its own Twitter thing on it. So there we go. I like kind of promoting the open source projects from OWASP because if you know me at all, you know I'm like a big fan of OWASP. Apparently, Cohesion, I've never heard of Cohesion before, so this was kind of exciting. Contrast Security has a community edition now, and apparently it does APIs, and I was like, damn, I gotta check that out. More than one person suggested Zap, more than one person suggested Burp Suite, more than one person suggested Wrestler, which is from Microsoft. Some people posted about NetSparker, and I was like, cool. And then more than one person suggested about Neuralegion. So that's awesome. I am on the board for Neuralegion. So I try not to constantly push the things I'm on the board for, even though I think they're awesome. But I have not used it to do extensive testing. Like I have scanned an API with it before, and we found all the things I told you about, but what I believe is that they can do a lot more than just that. So those are some tools. And again, I put like the link in the chat from my Twitter status or whatever, or just follow me and look on my profile and you can find it, which is at SheHacksPurple. Yeah, Contrast is not a cheap tool. And the fact that they made a community edition is really cool. Also kind of like for startups. So it does one app, and everyone except startups or open source projects have more than one app, right? So if you're an enterprise and you start using it on one app and you really like it, then you're going to buy it. That's the idea. I really, really like that they made a community edition. I actually asked them at RSA a few years ago if they would consider it, and then they actually did it, which I have to say is amazing that like I could put a request out into industry, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who asked, but like seeing it happen is really exciting. So let's talk about some best practices specifically around APIs. So the very first thing you want to do is get inventory of all your APIs. It is hard. Inventory of webby things is hard. If you want inventory of physical things or of infrastructure, it's way easier. But webby infrastructure or webby inventory is difficult. There are some companies that do public-facing inventory of your domains, and so those are like the ones that I know of that I've seen are BitDiscovery and Asset Note, which I'm just going to put in the chat and then put up on the screen for you. So BitDiscovery is based out of America, Asset Note's based out of Australia, and I've seen them both in action, and I'm like, damn, you found a lot of cool stuff. They still base it on your like public footprint, but they will find like your whole public footprint, and that's really cool. But you probably have all sorts of domains you're not aware of, and also you probably have just a ton of things that don't have a web front end and therefore don't have a domain name really that they can go and check. And so when I say inventory for APIs, I mean things that are internal and public facing. If someone can talk to it, you need to know who's talking to it. And so some ways that you could create an inventory of all your APIs would be, for starters, if you have an on-premises data center, get Nmap, and every single different zone of your network, run Nmap and look for open ports 80 and 443. So 80 is HTTP, 443 is HTTPS. And so you want to scan, and if there is something open, then there's probably a webby thing on there. And if there isn't, then close it. Either way, it's a good exercise. If you are using cloud stuff, if there's a platform as a service, a PaaS, that adds an app on it. It just does. You don't buy a PaaS and then not put an app on it. So all of those are going to be apps. And then look at all your infrastructure, so your containers and your virtual machines. And again, if 80 or 443 is open, that is definitely probably something webby or a mistake and you want to close it. So go check all those out. Another thing you can do is look in your code repository. And I know this is going to sound really dumb, but look up API. Everything that opens is probably an API, but you probably want to look through every single project because all of those are probably web apps and a bunch of them are in prod, and you want to add those to your inventory because you want to know the web apps too. Then go to your CI/CD systems. So whether you use Jenkins, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, Circle CI, Bamboo, GitLab. GitLab has come out with a bunch of AppSec tools recently, and I would love to get my hands on those in case GitLab's watching. I'm very interested in all the cool stuff you've been doing. Anyway, so go check out all your CI/CDs. Anything that's being released is probably an app or infrastructure as code. Check through there. There's probably a bunch of APIs being released. And then put all that together and then send out a survey, like a manual survey to your teams and ask them. In the comments, someone says GitLab is so cool. Yeah. Agreed. But the fact that they've made a huge play to be like the DevSecOps pipeline just obviously attracts me because I am obsessed with DevSecOps and I want to play with their stuff, but also budget is a thing. Anyway, thanks, Ben. So those are some ways that you can get inventory, and then literally ask the teams. And you want to make this inventory available to your incident response team. You want to make it available to the architects, like the security architects and the regular like webby architect people. All the devs probably want to know what this inventory is, and you want to know not only like what the app does it have sensitive data, a link to it, or like how it's accessed, what technology it's built in, and who the contact people are. As a very minimum, those are the things I would want to know. You could do one better and add where the code is, a link to dev, QA, staging, prod, etc. That would be awesome. The more information you can put in there, the better, as long as it's accurate. Okay, so now let's assume that you have an inventory of your APIs. I believe that all external facing APIs should be connected via an API gateway. Why? Because a gateway, so like, you know how you have like a door on the front of your house and then people theoretically have to go through the door to get in. I realize windows are a thing, but let's pretend windows aren't a thing. So everyone comes in through the door. My door is glass. Well, not all of it, but some of it. So I can go and look and be like, do I want to open the door to that person? Usually, unfortunately, because I live in an apartment building, it's someone delivering pizza to one of the other people, and then it always smells awesome, and it upsets me because I'm usually not having pizza. But anyway, I tell them to go around to this side or this side to one of the other apartments, and then end up feeling frustrated that I'm not having pizza. But anyway, the point is having a door lets you check who's coming. So API gateways will do authentication and authorization for you, so you don't have to do it. So you know who you're talking to, and if you should be talking to them. It can also do throttling and quotas. So throttling is slowing things down when someone's going too fast. If you have children in your life, you'll know that they'll just like run crazy through a front door, and you're like, you are gonna step on the carpet and then slip and land on your bum and be really sad. Don't go running through the doorway. Walk like as though you are mature. And so this is the same thing that happens with APIs. Like, they get abused. And by that I mean some bot will call them over and over and over and over again. And either it'll call very, very quickly and try to brute force its way in. And so throttling slows it down. And then quotas, another thing that API gateways do, is they actually will stop. So like they'll say, you've got this much and you're done now. Bye-bye, see you tomorrow in 24 hours, or see you next week, or see you never, because you've abused us and you're not allowed back. I'm on to you. It can block an API, or it can block an IP address for you. And so an API gateway means that no one can talk to your API unless it's through this gateway, and they know who they're talking to and that they should be, so they're on a list of okay to talk to. And all of that is extremely helpful. The next thing that I expect is like best practices would be do the same logging, monitoring, and alerting as you would for any web app. APIs still need to log. I know logging space is expensive if you use the cloud. I know. And I know it's cheaper if you only keep them 90 days. Don't keep them 90 days. Keep them 365 days. I know it costs a lot, but if you've read my book, so of course I refer to my book all the time. Want to know why? Because I know everything in it. It's really helpful. So I wrote a book called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And in it, I quote this awesome article from Slashdot where they state that it takes 276 days, I believe, on average before people notice a data breach in their company. That is a long time. If you wipe your logs after 90 days, almost all the time there's going to be an error. Almost all the time. And that's really bad for obvious reasons. That's not going to work. And so it's very important that you keep your logs for way longer than 90 days, preferably 365 days. Then the next thing, monitoring. Yeah. Yes, Kelly. The next thing you want to do is monitoring. So you want to know what's going on. Like if your API is down, you want to know. And so monitoring is like it watches what's happening, and then alerting is it telling you, I'm scared. So some things that you could set, so you can pay to have monitoring. You can actually set up alerting yourself in your custom app. So I actually talk about that a lot. So let me share another link that's, again, from We Hack Purple. So where is it? Error handling and logging. So these are all the specifications of what I think you should log, what I will warn you should definitely not log. So I'm just going to put it on the screen. So it's newsletter.wehackpurple.com/errors with an S dash logging. But we actually cover alerts too. And so the reason why it is important is because sometimes people log sensitive information they shouldn't. And the also reason why it's important is they don't log things they should. If your app can alert you when something is wrong, that is extremely valuable. So for instance, if the API gateway has, like it's being overwhelmed, it will alert you because it's a tool that you paid for. But if your little API has something else going on with it, you need to alert on that. So some examples of when you should alert. If you think it's being brute forced. So if you're not using an API gateway, which I really want you to, but maybe you're not. Lots of people aren't. I'd say way more than half the people in the industry aren't. Like lots and lots aren't. If someone is trying to brute force you, I would say someone that tries to log in 100 times in 24 hours or less. No human is so patient that they will try that many times. If someone is making repeated mistakes in their requests, like the grammar or the protocol that they're using to talk to your API is incorrect and it's coming from the same API or the same IP address, humans make mistakes. Computers don't make typos, right? So if it's wrong, block it. And if it's a real person, like just send it a message that says, call us at this number and we'll talk. And I assure you, they're not going to call you because they are a malicious actor. Another thing that you should alert on, so in my opinion, you should try and then catch all your errors. So all errors should be caught. But to make sure you've caught every error, you should have a global exception handler. So let's say your API does 4 things and it tries this. And if it doesn't get it, it catches the error and it handles it properly. And so it does that for all 4. But you have a global exception handler in case something really wacky happens and it fails not in one of those places. The global exception handler will catch that and you want to alert. Because 1, let's say you missed a place where you should be catching an error. It'll tell you that. But 2, it means something really weird is happening. And when something really weird is happening, there's a decent chance it's a security problem. Okay, so that is logging, monitoring, and alerting. I have more stuff to say. So for all web apps, you should do this. But for APIs, we forget it a lot. We should block all of the HTTP methods that we're not using. So almost all web apps use get and put. They use it like it's going out of style and they're really happy. But there's also, they use get and post. But there's also put, there's delete, there's trace, there's head. If you are not using them as part of your API or application, block those, turn them off, disable them. Because guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to call your API on a delete call. I'm going to try it on a get, on a put. And so as an example, so of course, like famous examples help. Facebook was trying to say no to a bounty hunter that had used a get command to delete a picture from another user. And so the delete command usually verifies that you're only deleting your own stuff, right? Like you can't delete stuff from another user. That's usually bad in like every app. Unless you're the administrator, you shouldn't be able to delete other users' stuff. And so they had denied the request and said, no one would ever do a delete action on a get call. And so what the person did was they went to Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook profile and started deleting his photos. And yeah, that got their attention. Because think of, if you threat model that for just a second, lots of people would be deleting a lot of things, right? Okay, so you want to disable all the HTTP methods that your app isn't using, whether it's an API or it's a regular web app with a front end. Next, service mesh. If you are using, so if you have an app and it has like 2 APIs in the back end, you don't need a service mesh, you're fine. But if you are someone like Netflix and you have a microservices architecture with like tons and tons and tons they have millions of services, I believe, like over 1 million. Wow, that's amazing. If you have that many services doing all their little things, guess what happens? Boom, they bang into each other by accident because our networks and protocols were not made for that. Like HTTP as a protocol was never meant to even keep a session. It was never even meant to be used where a person could log in. It was just supposed to be, you see a static web page, you read it, and then you go away. That was like the whole plan for the web originally. That was it. And so instead we changed it and we added like stuff on top to make it do the things we wanted. And so specifically with a microservices architecture, you would just have so many services doing so many things and they'll bash into each other. So service mesh was created. And service mesh specifically is, it's a layer of infrastructure. So you don't need to change your code. It encrypts everything, like to and from, all the actions are encrypted and all of the little services go through it. And what happens is it makes sure they don't bang into each other. It makes sure that they talk to each other extremely quickly, much faster than a regular network would be able to do. And it protects them from anyone, spying on them because it encrypts it. A service mesh can be agnostic. So Istio, I'm just going to type that and I'm going to put it on the screen because it's a fake weird word. Right? It's a brand name, Istio. It is agnostic, so it can be used on any cloud and on-prem. But every single one of the major cloud providers like GCP, AWS, Azure, they all also have their own they offer. I don't find any specific service mesh to be extraordinarily exciting personally, but if you are going to do like a hybrid situation where you have some of your stuff on premises, like in your own data center, and some up in the cloud, if you're just using service mesh in the cloud and you only have microservices in the cloud, that would work and you could just use that cloud provider's mesh. But if you're going to have some stuff on-prem, do you really want to have 2 different tools? Or if you're going to do a multi-cloud approach, so let's say you're a company and you do everything in AWS, and then you bought a little startup and they do everything in Azure. Do you want to have 2 service meshes that you have to handle, or do you want to have 1? So often people will choose an agnostic service mesh. Okay, I need to thank my sponsor. I completely forgot. I was super flustered because our guest was unable to come to the show, which obviously really sucks. But I want to thank our sponsor, ThreadFix, powered by Denim Group. They make the most stupendous vulnerability management system this side of the galaxy. I actually really love their tool. I genuinely think it's awesome. I am a huge fan of metrics, and that is what it is used for. So it gathers up all the data, and then it shows you trends over time. It shows you which team kicks ass and which team needs a little more help. And being able to see all of your results in the same place is extremely helpful. Okay, hopefully that was, I felt like that was really good. Okay. Oh, and yes, part of being their sponsor does mean they gave me a free license. Yes, I did ask for one. Okay, so more things. I think that we should implement standards in organizations for what we want to see for our APIs. If we're like, oh, the devs aren't making secure APIs, did you give them guidance on what you want? So please feel free to just like grab the one that I already shared at newsletter.wehackpurple.com/API-security. Feel free to just use that one. That's cool. Feel free to be way more specific. I think you should have a secure coding policy. And I think that you should have a special part for APIs. Like, you still have to validate all the inputs to your API. Do not trust anyone or anything. As I joke, don't even trust your mom, because my mom once sent me a virus and she's like, that was so many years ago, Tanya, you don't have to keep bringing it up. But that means even a person who's a mathematician chemist, who's incredibly intelligent and who I trust extremely, like, I trust this person so much, even that person can make a mistake. That's the purpose of this. So I think that it's really important that you still follow the exact same secure coding best practices with your APIs, and that you provide guidance to your devs so you actually get what you want. Another thing that I would suggest is strict linting of your API calls. So I think we should strictly lint everything. What is a linter, you ask? So a linter is a tool that looks at your code and makes sure that you are not taking any poetic license. It is a little bit like the grammar police, but for your code. So you know how there's some languages where you don't have to declare what type of variable it is. It's like, oh, well, we'll just figure it out when you use it. Grammar police, and by that I mean the linter, says, no way, Jose. Tell me exactly what you plan to do with this variable, or I will not compile you. When we remove all of those things and we make sure that we are following the letter of the law of our framework and our language, we're a lot less likely to fall into security traps. So strict linting really helps. If you are not going to use an API gateway, it is important that you authenticate. And by that I mean figure out who you are talking to, and then authorize. Then let them in and show them the areas they're allowed to see. If you decide, like, even just letting them in enough to the code where you authorize them, that's too far if you don't know who they are. Another thing for APIs specifically is avoiding verbose error messages. I remember the first time that I pen tested an API, I was like, you keep telling me exactly what I did wrong. And they're like, yeah, because you might make a typo. I'm like, computers don't make typos. Stop giving me so many hints. Smash. You want, like, an API has no front end. It should only be speaking to computers. You don't need to give it a nice message at all. It's just like, invalid input, and that's it. Yes, that would annoy a user, but a user should never be calling your API. A human should never be calling your API. If a human's calling your API, if they are not your pen tester or red teamer or a dev or a QA person who's testing, you are in serious danger. This person is a malicious actor. And so you don't need nice error messages. Okay, so I have two more things. Oh, yeah. Actually, I already said one of them. So you need to follow all the same secure coding practices that you normally would. So this means doing proper input validation, not sanitization, doing parameterized queries, checking the bounds, etc. Like, be just as strict as you would be without, do just as much testing as you would, etc. And then the last one, which again applies to all apps, decommission old or unused versions of the API. If you're on version 3.1 of your API, 3.0 should not be running, and 2.0 should not be running. All those should be turned off. Sometimes people forget. And if you have an inventory, going through like every quarter and checking to see if they're all still there and that the inventory is accurate and that you've decommissioned things you're supposed to have commissioned could save you a breach. There are so many things that are out there on different enterprise networks because some person, got reassigned to some other group, or they got a promotion, or, they left and went off to work somewhere else. And they didn't mean to leave an old app live, but they did. And one, you're paying that bill. At the very least, you want to turn it off because of that. And two, it's not getting security updates. It's not getting security attention or testing or anything. It's not getting dev attention. You don't want that to be live. And so those are the best practices that I have for you right now. There's a few more comments. Sometimes the mobile app has a different set of APIs than the web app does, and you can abuse one or the other through that. So for instance, uncalled API functions in the app can be enumerated. Yes, Ben, that's so true. That's very true. Yeah, I remember my first web app pen test. I go in for the meeting. I'm like, hi, everyone. Hi. And I was like, may I assume in the scope that it's going to include all the APIs behind the mobile app? And the two devs looked at each other and they're like, how can you see those? And I was like, oh, I just did this with Burp Suite and now I can just see them. They're right here. Can you see? And they're like, you're already hacking our app? I'm like, no. I just did like a little proxy so that I could write up the scope document for this engagement. And so like I named them all, and I just wanted to make sure that all of them are in scope, that I did get all the ones you wanted, and they just looked like they wanted to crawl under their chair and die. And it turned out that they said to the boss, like, we don't need to include APIs in the whatever because no one could ever see them. And like me saying that had like totally made their manager's point, unfortunately. Yeah. Anyway. Do we have any last questions? If you want to, you can put them in the chat. We teach this and more at We Hack Purple, and usually it's less of a whirlwind and I'm a bit more, someone's like, Burp is amazing. Yeah, I agree. Usually there's like lessons and exercises and other things when we teach. It's not just me blabbing on for like 40 minutes. Because I want to make sure that you actually learn all of the content. I hope that you found this useful. I really hope everything is super cool and totally awesome with Farah, and like maybe she just slept through an alarm or something. If we can, we will have her on because she's totally awesome, and I definitely want to talk to her all about her amazing bounty hunting, and I bet she has a lot of comments about APIs. I'm going to thank our sponsor one more time, ThreadFix. Awesome sauce all round. I want to thank my amazing sound engineer for being here with me and always making me sound and look amazing. This would be so much more work without you, and I really appreciate you. There's one more comment in the chat. I thought people would be using Kubernetes for microservices rather than just HTML. Kubernetes manages containers rather than like microservices are more the apps. So like infrastructure versus software. I know that infrastructure sort of is software now, so that's like a bit, yeah. Oh, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Kellen. Thank you to everyone who came. I really appreciate it. And this was We Hack Purple, and we will see you next week.